Welcome to The Pestle, reviewing and breaking down movies to look for insights into the movie-making process. Hosted by Swarley and Teddy Westside. Let's dim the lights and start the show.
Welcome everybody to The Pestle. Today's show is brought to you by Pete's Luncheonette. Come eat at Pete's and get the best salad in town. It's really big. Welcome to The Pestle. I am Wes.
And I am Todd.
And this is a show where we like to analyze films and TV shows as of late and kind of pick them apart in a good way. I don't think we're ever too harsh on things. We're honest. I would say we don't necessarily hold punches, but we also have an optimistic side that we understand that these are difficult things to do, productions, to write and foresee the whole entire universe before and create it and see it through to the end. And so I think we try to pay due respect to even some of the films that we dislike, even Twilight and Transformers.
Yeah, exactly. Spoiler alert, if you have seen How I Met Your Mother, the pilot for that, or Seinfeld, or any of these, make sure you pause this episode, go watch those, and then come back and join us.
Yeah, we'll talk about a lot of things. Mostly, obviously, this episode where we're going to be talking about How I Met Your Mother, but we'll also probably reference Friends and Cheers, since those are the last two episodes that are kind of in the same ballpark. And we'll talk about a few things, writing and story and cinematography, and we'll touch on the end of the show. So if you have not seen How I Met Your Mother more than Friends and Cheers, this show has a very specific path that it's taking. And if you don't know how it ends, you may want to hold off and, I don't know, binge watch for the next 3 weeks this show.
Yeah, it's really long.
It's a very long ride.
How many seasons is it?
Nine
8?
Seasons.
9.
Yeah.
9. I noticed you're in a new place, man.
Yeah, so just got moved into a new apartment. It's nice, man. My last apartment was a bit of a nightmare in the worst ways. Like the apartment itself was fine. I don't really care too much about accoutrement and whatnot, but the management there was like pretty awful people, to be quite blunt about it. This I will be critical about, because I was paying these people money and they were like, at one point they literally towed my car based on something that wasn't in our contract. Like they said I needed to have a parking sticker, but they never told me like that I needed a parking sticker. So I just kind of I was in Ireland filming and I get an email from a buddy saying, hey, your car got towed. And I was like, that's not possible. I told them I'm going to Ireland. They didn't try to contact me or anything. And so when I get back, sure enough, my car was towed, and they said that, yeah, you didn't have a parking sticker. I was like, you never told me I needed one. I've been in your office like 1,000 times, and I just signed a new lease like 3 months ago. I just read my lease. None of this says anything about a parking pass. Like, this is insane. And they're like, oh yeah, well, sorry about that. But you're going to have to go pay to get your car out of impound.
Oh my gosh.
And it was just one of these things, like I was beside myself. And they definitely have not heard the last of this. I've waited to move out, and now I'm going to get a lawyer, because I cannot believe anybody would do that. Like, it was just insane. And so they did that. Fast forward like 2 weeks, I buy a new car, and they tow it again because they wanted to pave the parking lot and didn't tell me that they were going to pave the parking lot. And instead of saying, hey, can you move your car to the other side of the lot, they just towed me again. And in doing so, scratched my new car, and took no responsibility for that either. So and that's still only kind of getting in the high level. So this new apartment is definitely nicer, like on the eyes. I would not be ashamed to have people here or even film in this place. Not that I didn't film in the last place, because I'm a filmmaker and you use what you have, but I would use this place in a much different way. I would like have this somewhere that people want to be, instead of like a dungeon or something. But even more than that, the management is super cool. Like, we've already had one kind of misstep, and the way they've handled it is just night and day difference. Like, they didn't tell me I was supposed to be paying for the washer and dryer that was supposed to be included in the rent. And they were like, hey, yeah, we blew this one. We screwed this up. We're going to try to make it right. Blah, blah, blah. And so we're still kind of working through that. But the attitude is completely different. I don't mind. Stuff happens. This is life. I understand that. But it's how you deal with these scenarios. So I am still getting unpacked. We just literally finished moving yesterday.
Man.
So still getting unpacked and in the middle of casting and location scouting for a 30-page drama. So I feel like my hair is slightly on fire, and I can't quite focus on any one thing. So the next few weeks are challenging, to say the least. Especially
because you're going to let me audition for one of those roles, and it's going to be real. I'm just going to let you know it's going to be really awkward if I don't get the part. Just going to say, we're going to have some really awkward pestles if I don't get the part. Just saying.
Yeah. And all I'm going to do
hold the grudge.
Is I'll just keep replaying. Instead of a show intro, I'm going to play bits and pieces of your audition tape. So.
Oh, God. Oh, Oh, you win.
This show brought to you by, my name's Todd Tapio.
With Brown Agency.
And then I'm going to turn it into like a EDM mix.
Okay. Like one of those bad lip syncing videos. Oh, please do that to me. That'd be amazing.
No, I am excited about it. And I think, I'll kind of touch on that in this episode too, because it's hard. Casting is hard. So maybe I can talk about things I'm going to be looking for and how that relates to casting something like a TV show pilot, because that's a freaking challenge, bro. And so, we're going to talk about,
it's everything.
It's everything, especially for a sitcom. So we'll touch on all the things: writing, cinematography, how it ends, and other such stuff and things and stuff. Yeah,
so quick synopsis. A father recounts to his children through a series of flashbacks the journey he and his 4 best friends took leading up to him meeting their mother. It's created by Carter Bays and Craig Thomas, featuring Josh Radnor as Ted Mosby, Jason Segel as Marshall Eriksen, Cobie Smulders as Robin Scherbatsky, Neil Patrick Harris as Barney Stinson, and Alyson Hannigan as Lily Aldrin.
I didn't, I swear.
But see, at least tonight I get to sleep knowing Marshall and me, never gonna happen. You should have kissed her.
I should have kissed her. Well, maybe in a week when she gets back from Orlando.
A week? That's like a year in hot girl time. She'll forget all about you. Mark my words, you will never see that one again.
There she is.
Ooh, she's cute. Hey, Carl, turn it up.
Persuaded him to reconsider, at which point the man came down off the ledge, giving this bizarre story a happy ending. Reporting from Metro One News.
Yeah, I didn't jump. I'm gonna go kiss her. Right now.
Look, dude, it's midnight. As your future lawyer, I'm gonna advise you that's freaking crazy.
I never do anything crazy. I'm always waiting for the moment, planning the moment. Well, she's leaving tomorrow. This may be the only moment I'm gonna get. I gotta do what that guy couldn't. I gotta take the leap. Okay, not a perfect metaphor, because for me it's fall in love and get married, and for him it's death.
Actually, that is a perfect metaphor. By the way, did I congratulate you two?
I'm doing this.
Nice. So I got 2 questions right off the bat for you. For one, like the show as a whole, like what's your, because I know you watched this whole thing before, a while ago, to be fair, but show as a whole and the pilot in specific, like how do you feel about both of these things?
I mean, yeah, the show as a whole, it's so weird because I love the show, but I had my issues with Ted. He's just such like a over the top, fallen, like in love with being in love kind of guy. That at times you're like, dude, chill, really, like my God. And this episode was like a good example of that. I mean, showing up at her house and telling her he loved her that the 2:00 in the morning, their first date. But honestly, it's a brilliant show. I just love it. I love the way that they use their flashbacks. I mean, it's a show about flashbacks. Like they use flashbacks better than any other show. I mean, obviously, and all the time, constantly. But that's kind of welcoming because it takes you out of the moment, gives you another little tidbit story, a little bit of history, a little bit more solidifying of the character, right? To give you a little bit backstory, so you feel like you've known them for years. You know, even after the first episode, you feel like you've known them for years because there's actual flashbacks of them. So it's a good way to kind of like solidify this is the crew, and then you kind of know what to expect moving forward. They do a really good job of establishing everybody. You know that Barney is like, you know, the player. You know that Lily and Marshall, they're, you know, together. They've been together since they were in high school. You know that Ted is like crazy about falling in love, and so it was really good. It's really good at establishing the characters. You end up really liking the characters in the end. Even Ted, who is for me difficult to like, I still end up liking him in the end. But I might like him because I've seen all the episodes and I know, like, you know, how it turns out and all the things that happen to him and with him and Robin and stuff. But it's also just endearing because it was such a good time in my life when I was watching this show and catching up on it. So I loved it. I loved the show. I love the pilot. I think it's a brilliant pilot. And I mean, that blue French horn is started on first episode. It's in the last, it's like throughout the entirety of the show, it's circulated around this blue French horn and about Robin and the friends, and you establish it right then. It's great.
Yeah, that's a really good bookend, and it's one of those things where I assume they knew that at the beginning, but maybe not. Maybe it's just one of those
How can you know that over 9 seasons, right? Yeah. You just kind of like establish like, okay, blue French horn. We're just gonna keep coming back to this, right?
It's a nice little way to have some kind of iconic, unique thing about your show. And I think every show probably wants something like that, but very few can pull it off. Like, I think to any average TV watcher, if I were to pull out a blue French horn and hold it up, it's very and I think they're kind of stealing that from Say Anything, like the boombox overhead, and it's, why not? Like, I think they do a great job of not overly ripping it off. It's a homage, you know, if you notice it, and really cool if you don't. And so I think everybody would understand what I'm doing, you know, if I held that up. And to me, that's what iconic is all about. And it's creating something identifiable and unique and and evokes something, like him holding that up, because that was the whole thing at the end of the episode, right? Is I need, you know, to make one dramatic gesture, and what better way can I do that than get this thing that was a conversation piece on our first date. And then, you know, he doesn't even, and at the final episode, he doesn't have to say a word, you know, he's just there holding it, and she's like, yeah, and then smash cut, you know, to credits or whatever. But I would say overall same. I mean, I've seen this show a lot. It became my show to fall asleep to for a while, and so I've probably seen it in some fashion or another in its entirety between 5 and 7 times.
The whole show?
Yeah, the whole show. Like the
wow.
Yeah, the first time I didn't start watching this until 2012 after I quit my job and became like a full-time filmmaker. And so,
was that 2012?
That was 2012.
Oh my god.
8 years ago.
Wow.
And so the first thing you do whenever you quit your job is sit around and watch TV endlessly.
TV. Yeah. Yeah. You're
so
right.
Literally for the first 2 weeks, I just sat around watching How I Met Your Mother and like eating ice cream. So I too have very good memories of watching.
Yeah. This is a good time in your life too. Yeah.
But I think watching the pilot, it's so funny just because you understand where the show ends up. And so for me, watching the pilot, I can see how stiff and clunky it is in certain aspects, like the performances and the dialogue. You can see they're still finding their way, and it's so hard to generate chemistry with right off the bat. Like from the first episode, you have to make people believe that these are all best friends and they've known each other for years and years. Like they all met their first year in college and they've been best friends ever since. And that's why casting is so critical. And to your point earlier, the flashbacks do so much to help solidify that in the viewer's mind. Because whereas most pilots, you know, you get to see the characters in 4 or 5 scenes, here we get to see them in, I don't know, 7 or 8 scenes. And the more you see them in new areas, in new environments, and giving them backstory, and you flash back and then flash forward, it suddenly builds out the world. Even though it's only been 22 minutes, you feel like you've been sitting with these people, you know, for a couple of years. And that is the magic of having flashbacks as your exposition. It's very convenient.
Mm-hmm.
But that's why casting is also so important, and it's so difficult. Like for me, whenever I'm casting, I don't usually have to worry about, am I going to be working with these people for the next 5 years? And whenever you're shooting a pilot, that's your hope. You want to make it to 5 or 6 years, because at that point, I think the deals get much, much better. You're renegotiating your contracts and you're starting to look at real money and real pay in terms of syndication. That's a very magic time frame. So you're always aiming for that 5-year mark. And so whenever you're casting, you're thinking, do I want to work with this person for 5 years? It can't just be about the performance. It's mostly about the performance. But then once you get to a certain crop, you got to start thinking, can I work with these people day in and day out? Because a pilot or a TV show, you're looking at 20 to 24 episodes a year. And if each one of these episodes takes a week to shoot, that's 6 months of just shooting on set with these people. And so you really need to think about personality. And so a lot of stuff, whenever I'm casting, I'm this thing that we're going to start casting, you know, this drama that I'm working on. I'm going to do it in three different sessions, 3 different weeks or phases. So the first phase is going to be, everyone's going to self-record, self-tape your audition. And for a lot of these people, they need to be musicians. So show me playing your music, and also pick a monologue. You know, I think most actors have a monologue that they already have ready to go. I know I always had one that I worked on and could show on in 10 minutes notice. I could be performing a monologue. And most actors have that in the bag. So do a monologue and show, you know, that you can play music. And this first round is just to see who's competent. I just want to know that you can do both of those things. Are you an actor? And I can probably look at your resume and find that out. But I also want to know that, you know, your own work you take seriously, and you can perform and you can play the music. And that's enough to pick, you know, 15, 20 people to move into the second round, where they'll start working on the material that I've written. And then they can show me that, yeah, I can take this character, you know, and make it my own. And then the third round will be, and that second round will be over video, because we're living in the time of COVID. And so the third round, we're going to see if by that time, you know, the restrictions feel good enough that we can do some in-person auditions and see how that goes. That's TBD, you know, like we don't know at this point. And for those in the know, we're recording on May 5th. And so if you're listening to this in June, it may be obvious, but it's not as obvious in early May. And so
yeah,
that's the hope. And part of my process is, especially for, you know, in-person auditions, is, do they show up on time? Like, can you be punctual? Do you have, you know, your script more or less memorized? And it's not to say you can't have your script in hand. I don't mind that at all, because every once in a while you need to reference it. That's fine. But by and large, you should know your lines. And those are 2 major tells for me, but you also shouldn't be locked in. I want to know that if I need to change your emotional direction, that the words on the page are just words on the page. They're not your intention. Everything that you're creating for the character is inside you, and it's not in your delivery. Your delivery is the end result of that intention you're creating within as an actor. And so if I say, yeah, you're playing this, that was a really great read, and I'll do this just to do it, just to see if they're capable or if they're locked into their own read. And so I'll give them a contradictory read just to see if they can be directable. And so if they played it angry, I'll say that was fantastic. Actually, can you try it that you're just more distraught and upset? You're not mad, and then see how they take it from there. And that can give me so much information about what it's going to be like to work with you on set, because sometimes the client is on set and they need to change something or for whatever reason, and I need to figure out, can I rework this scene with you on the fly? And that's only something you can find by changing something. It's not about casting for the look. For me, it's all about casting for the actor, who's the best actor that I can get for this part. And if they happen to fit the look as well, all the better. But I always start with performance. And for them, yeah. And I think for something like a sitcom, man, you want someone who can take it somewhere that you didn't know as a writer. That's the weirdest thing in the world, is to write something and to see someone else perform it, and you're like, oh, I didn't even consider that it could be read that way. Like, I hear these voices in my head when I'm writing, and you know this, you're a writer. Like, for me anyway, whenever I'm writing dialogue, I can literally hear the characters talking in my head, and I'm kind of following. Now, they don't have their own lives. I know some writers have this thing where the writers have the characters have their own thing that they want to do. I don't necessarily have that as strong. They're still my puppets, but I can hear them talking. And for a sitcom, whenever you're thinking, I don't know where this character is going to go at the end of this season, let alone, the fourth season, you need to know that if suddenly they, go into a deep depression, that this actor can do this. So I can only imagine how many, if I'm doing 3 for one 30-minute drama, casting a sitcom pilot, you're probably doing 10 rounds, and then screen testing with all your cast members, and then screen testing with other cast members to see if that's a better fit. Like, it's probably a nightmare as an actor.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Ooh.
Oh yeah, but that's like, part of the fun of it, I think. Like, right? Don't you like kind of live for that? Getting a callback, booking, or like, getting a second callback, like, getting asked to read in different ways. Like, yeah, it's nerve-wracking, and it's exciting, right? Like I'm going to audition for you. I'll be just like, if I get a callback, I'll be just as excited as if it were, somebody I didn't know. Like, this, like, it has nothing to do with it. It's just about the excitement of like, oh man, I made it to the next round, whether I book it or not, whatever, but just getting one of those and having the opportunity to put your stamp on a script or on, some lines is just, it's like so fulfilling. It's so much fun to do, especially on a drama. Like, my God, man, that's like, from someone who does like commercials all over the place, and like there's no drama in the commercials. I mean, you're lucky if you have lines, and if you do, they're definitely not dramatic. So it definitely scratches that itch for sure, to be able to at least audition.
Totally, yeah. Commercials, it's all shiny, happy people. It's very little like, oh, I'm conflicted, and I'm playing against someone who wants something different than me, and now I have to figure out how to get what I want out of them. And that's hard, and it makes you really physically engage in a way that commercials, it's almost, how hard can you smile and look like you fit into the scenery, because you're just a prop, like in most of these commercials. And that's exhausting, man. I remember in that experience, I know exactly what you mean, because for years I was just auditioning and not getting any callbacks. And at a certain point, I stopped caring, and I just started enjoying the audition itself. Like, I get to perform today. And if there were lines in the performance, so much better, because now I really get to chew on a scene and try to make something magical in the room, and see if I can get the casting director's attention, and just be fulfilled in performing. And that's fun. Like, once you get to that place where it's great, if I book or if I get a callback, amazing. I am super excited about that. But even better if I'm just excited about the script and the opportunity to perform. As a performer, the stage is addicting.
And honestly, it's like there's something kind of fulfilling about being judged in kind of like what you do. Like, 'cause it's cool, sit in your room and play guitar. That's cool. But it's so much cooler to play your guitar for someone who then and then there that pregnant pause where you when you're done, like wondering, like, was that good? Did they like it? Are they going to tell me the truth? Like, like those kinds of things. Like, that's kind of like what makes you feel alive as an artist, is that kind of thing. It's I could write 100 songs in my room, but that doesn't matter. Or I could, perform or practice, lines and stuff in my room, but it doesn't really matter unless I'm performing it with somebody who's going to, either give me feedback or give me the gig. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
yeah. Anyway, casting, very important.
Super important. Very long, painful process, but clearly critical to any production, because as much as every role on set understands they're important to the set production, nobody arguably is more important than who's in front of the camera.
And you know what? It's just to interrupt you for a second. It's interesting because I always feel, and I don't know why I do, but I always feel a little like when I'm on a set, like when I'm acting on a set and I've been hired, I'm like, the actor. I have this like really weird feeling of wanting to take care of everybody else, of like feeling like I don't want to be the entitled actor, while you got these guys, and I know it's their job, but you got these guys, like hoisting big heavy lights and moving shit around like really fast, and like, a director with a vision and all this stuff, like, and nothing can happen without all of them, right? And all I have to do is act. I just act, right? And arguably it's the hardest job. Like, let's be honest. Like, to do it well, it's arguably the hardest job. But it just feels like, I just always feel a little bit like, man, I hope nobody thinks that I'm being, like, oh, the actor.
It's funny because it's so important, and especially on like union projects, you're not allowed to do anything but act. You're not supposed to pick up a crate,
right?
A light.
Yeah.
Like, literally.
I've gotten in trouble.
Yes. You will get in trouble for trying to help out on set, because union rules state that you stick to your role. And if suddenly, you start trying to drive the van, the Teamsters are going to have a word with you, because that's their job. If you start picking up, a light, the grip is going to be like, no, sir, that's my job. You're affecting my job, and it's not good. So everyone has to stick to the role, and for a good reason, to a large extent. Like, as an actor, your job is to perform in front of the camera. The last thing they need you to do is get sweaty and hurt yourself or break some equipment that you don't know how to operate. And so it's really important that you do stay in your lane, even though I know that feeling, especially the first several times I was on set. I felt really lazy because I wasn't carrying gear or anything. And it took me a little while to understand that. And it probably didn't really fully kick in until I was a filmmaker, that I don't want my actors doing that thing. Like, you stay over there and stay out of the way. We're going to set up and we're going to make you look good, but I only need you to be ready whenever I, call action. And so stay in your universe, stay in your world, and be prepared for that. It's critical. It's mission critical.
Yeah.
Going a little bit further, like you said, we're just going to go through writing and story real quick. They did a great job about, quick to the characters. It was very focused on developing them, and most importantly, opening on the hook. This is a story about how I met your mother. It's right there in the title, and the premise is a really great hook. People love love stories, and they love rom-coms, so they made a sit rom-com, that is heavily serialized. Most episodes build on the premise instead of a bunch of self-contained bottle episodes. Every episode is constantly exploring, to a large degree, I would say, just shooting off the hip here. Like 90% of these episodes are about Ted kind of exploring his love life and to some extent how that impacts the rest of the group. And we all see their stories develop, of course. But the core of the show, How I Met Your Mother, is very much dedicated to exploring that path. There's a lot of other shows that have a strong premise, but veer off for chunks at a time before getting back on track. This, I never really feel very far away from the core element throughout the show. And I love a good love story. And even though we don't really meet the mom until the final season, that, going back to casting again, that's got to be the hardest thing in the world to cast. Like, we have these core characters and now we need to insert another core character, and she needs to feel like she fits in with everyone here, and she's the love of Ted's life. And you know, throughout the show we see a variety of women and types, and they all are great to some extent or another, but most of them don't feel exactly right either. We're like, no, this isn't, she's amazing, but she's not right for Ted. And then once you finally meet her, you're like, oh, she's not what I expected, but damn it if she isn't right. That's hard. That's so hard.
Yeah, it's very hard.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
And Kristen Milioti is amazing. And I love that for the last season, they give her main credits, as well as the very final episode at the very end, after he's holding the French horn, they cut to this kind of backtrack of all the original cast members, and they insert her into it as well, which they should. It's the smart thing. She's a title character. But they didn't have to. Like, she was only there for one season, but they still treated her as an equal to the rest of the cast, which is, I think, really damn cool. And
it's really hard for someone to come in after so many seasons and everybody, the whole audience wants Ted to end up with Robin. Everyone wants Ted to end up with Robin. And so to bring someone else in and for them to take on that role and that responsibility of like, okay, now I need to get everybody to want me to marry Ted, you know? That's something hard to do in a very short amount of time, and so late in the game. So. Yeah.
Incredibly difficult. And for me, I think they nailed it. Like, I was very happy with all of that. As far as the pilot again, the voiceover I really liked, and they use this throughout the show. I'm hit or miss on voiceover stuff. Here, I think it works really, really well, especially for flashing back and forward. The narrator really helps to establish the exposition, and they use them to great comedic effect throughout the entire run of the show. Like in the pilot episode, you see them. Ted is going up. You know, he's suited up finally, and he has the French horn. He's walking up to the door to ring the bell, and they freeze frame, and the narrator kicks in. I forgot one minor detail, and they whip pan transition to the flashback of her at dinner. I have 5 dogs, and immediately flashback forward to 5 dogs barking at 1 a.m. and waking everybody up. Like, that's a really great use of all those elements that, you know, we're going to be using for the rest of this show. The narrator is playing his part to get laughs, and you're also using the flashback to inform the audience and build up an anticipation and a payoff. But also, I really love that they use the whip pans. I don't see this hardly used on any show. And so I always kind of enjoy when I see a good whip pan transition. And that's that effect where you see that blur whenever they flash back to something, and there's this like really quick streaky blur. That's just a whip pan, and they have, I want to say, these pre-built whip pans. Like, they don't actually whip pan in and out of these scenes, which I like to do personally on when I can insert it into a video. I film a take, and at the end of the take, I will whip pan out, and that just means if you're on a tripod, you're panning quickly left or right, as quickly as possible. You're going from a dead stop, and then whenever you're ready to start the transition, you literally just yank the tripod to the left or to the right, so that motion, that blurry, kicks in, and that becomes a cutting point. So that whenever you cut to your next sequence, your next scene, you're starting with the whip pan into the scene. And so you whatever. I have 5 dogs, and you're whip panning back into that scene, so that whenever you get into post, you have these 2 really weird edits that look weird on its face. You're ending a scene and that's blurry, and then you're starting a scene that's blurry. And the whip pan in is much harder than the whip pan out, because you need to start a scene on point, and you need to have a really strong feel for where the frame should land, because you're starting off frame. Like the camera's looking to the left and it needs to be centered, to the right, and suddenly you have to just nail your frame. That's a challenge, and it takes a seasoned professional, hopefully, to nail that. But in post, it creates this really fun transition that you can either hard cut between, like you get about halfway through the whip pan out and halfway into the whip pan in, and it creates this seamless transition. Or sometimes, and I tend to like the like a very small cross dissolve between the two. Instead of a hard edit, I'll just blend like 5 frames in between them, and it becomes even more seamless. And it's a fun style that, if the opportunity calls for it, it adds, I think, a level of polish and production quality that you don't see anywhere else, that all these kind of pre-built transitions aren't going to give you, because it's built into the production. And so, yeah, I love that they use those, even though they don't use them the exact same way that I do. They're still really fun to me. And anyway.
Yeah.
The other thing that I love about the show is, because of all the flashbacks and forwards and tinkering with time, there's a lot of very, very tiny setup and payoff Easter eggs. If you know what you're watching, like if you've only seen it once, you probably missed out on these Easter eggs, because you have to know what's happening and what's going to happen. So like in the first season, Ted meets this girl, Victoria, and he meets her at a wedding, and she's a baker. And it becomes this whole thing about them meeting and not knowing each other's names, blah, blah, blah. And we don't find out until towards the end of this whole whatever arc that, it was the baker at the wedding. Well, they set up that the baker's playing a part like 2 or 3 episodes before that, when they're just talking about the wedding itself. And Ted bumps into the bride on the street, and he's like, yeah, I'm really excited. My +1's coming. And it becomes this whole thing about, you don't have a +1. And whenever he bumps into her, though, she's on the phone yelling at the baker. Mm-hmm. And it's Victoria. Like, she's yelling at Victoria way before we ever meet Victoria. But it's just this little tiny Easter egg. And the show is laced with these things.
Oh, yeah.
Like, most people probably don't know that Conan O'Brien is a background extra in one of these episodes.
Did not know that.
So random, but if you're not looking around, you're just going to miss a lot of stuff like that. Anyway, a lot of really fun, tiny things that if you're, curious about those things, at some point I kind of want to make a video kind of pointing these things out, but that's going to call for a very bored Wes. And
it's going to be a long video because there's a million of them.
A million.
I do love at the end where you think that, that Robin is the mother, and then he says this, and that was the story of how I met your Aunt Robin. Yeah. What? Cut. Right? It's just like, oh, snap. Okay. And then you never meet the mother, the actual mother, until later on. It's so much fun to go on that journey, right? And you're almost like you're like almost heartbroken throughout the whole time, because they're not going to end up together, but you love them together, and you're thinking the whole time, what is going to happen? What is to stop this? What is going on? Even when they're not together, when they're apart and they're like dating other people, you're just like, what is, what's going to be the straw,
Yeah, it is. And that mystery, definitely keeps us on our edge and entertained for sure. But I also love that this is a similarity we can see between Friends and Cheers and now How I Met Your Mother, that a love story is kind of at the core of keeping people hooked. As people were just fascinated with relationships and love. And, this isn't a show about how they discovered the Higgs boson. Like, this is, it's about the most basic fundamental reality of being a human being, which is love. And establishing a family, and progeny. Like, it's about this very simple, universal concept, and ultimately they just went much harder into it than Cheers or Friends did. They said, not only is that going to be what we're talking about, that's going to be the main thing, and we're going to put it front and center and make sure people understand. Because I'm sure in 2005 when this aired, it was getting crowded, in the sitcom territory, and harder to get people to notice you. So any small thing you could do to kind of stand above the crowd. And for a while, it probably, especially the first the first season, probably felt gimmicky, like, when are they just going to meet the mom? And after a time, you begin to realize there's much more to these characters' story than just meeting one person.
And if it's How I Met Your Mother, once you meet the mother, that's the beginning of the end of the story. Because it's in the title. Like, okay, I know how you met mom. Now what? I'm here. Yeah, I get it. So it's so brilliant to make that the name of the show and not give it to us for 7 years, 8 years.
And they filmed those kids at the end of season 2. So they figured out at the end of season 2 exactly how the finale would go. Like they said, I'm sure there were details within the finale, but as far as how they were going to wrap up everything with Ted and Robin, they knew exactly. And with the mom, they knew how that story ended, even if they didn't know all the details around it. They said, we got to write that scene right now and keep it hidden away. They had to, those actors, Lindsay Fonseca and I don't know the guy's name, they had to sign like these NDAs.
What, the kids?
Yeah. Because no one knew except them and like 3 other people in the room, like the sound man.
That's crazy.
The producers, like they had to keep a very tight set, and they couldn't talk about it for another 6 years, 7 years. Like that had to be painful.
Crazy.
Really crazy. And a lot of foresight. Like that's a hard thing to commit to and say, you know what?
Yeah.
This is what we're going to do. And we're not going to do it for another 5-6 years.
Well, maybe they didn't know it was going to be 5 or 6 years, right?
True.
Maybe they thought, well, if we get 3 seasons, and let's just film it now so that maybe we'll have 6 more years. But if we don't, we'll just, like, who knows, right? But yeah, that's really smart and crazy they did that. Damn.
As it goes. I don't have a lot in terms of cinematography. It's very basic coverage. Like they really don't go out of their way as far as cinematography goes to distinguish itself. It's not nearly as filmed like Friends or Cheers. But one difference that I found really interesting was that this was not filmed in front of an audience because there was just too many setups. And so what they would do, though, is they would shoot it, edit it, and then show it to an audience. And that would be how they captured the laugh track, would be showing.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. So it wasn't just them, pumping in fake laughs. It would be, we're going to have to figure out where our timing is comedically. And then if the audience starts trampling our lines, because that's the hard part about not filming in front of the audience. You don't know when they're going to stop laughing. And in Friends, you can always feel that they're waiting for the audience laughter to die down before they, perform the next line. Same thing with Cheers. And here they just have to wait with it. And I think it benefits the performance to a large degree because they're staying in character and they're thinking through their scenes. And I think it also means that this show, as compared to Friends, is not afraid of serious moments and emotional moments. I was always really happy with their ability to go there and take those moments very seriously and not undercut them constantly. And there's not like tons and tons of them, but there's a lot. There's more than you would expect out of a sitcom. And I just really appreciated that. But the other part about not filming in front of an audience is I assumed in the pilot, they show that back wall in the bar in order to reduce as the season went and as the seasons go, they stopped showing that back wall after a certain point. Very often, like they'll show it here and there, very, very sparingly.
Wait, the back wall? You mean like the corner?
Yeah. So like
back corner.
Yeah, like from the perspective of the bartender, Like you never see the setup breaking that 180-degree rule.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
Yeah, they stay on a certain side of the table, except in the pilot. In the pilot, they're showing you, a full 360 of the area, but I think they stopped doing that after the pilot or after a certain period of episodes because it's disorienting to have a laugh track where you're seeing where the audience should be.
Yeah.
Like it's kind of creating this disembodiment, effect of, wait, where am I supposed to be at right now if I'm not where the audience is and owning their perspective. And so I think they stopped doing that as much.
And we see them sitting in multiple places. Like we see Ted at one point with the goatee in the corner. We see them when he's telling them that he didn't kiss her at a table in the middle of the bar. And then towards the end where the cab driver is sitting with them, then they're at their booth. They're at the bar. They're like all over the place. Maybe it was them testing it out. Like
exploring.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe.
I think that's probably right. I mean, you don't really know what's going to feel the most natural and iconic. And the set is so important for sitcoms because these are the two spaces that everyone's going to live, right? In Friends, it's the coffee shop in their apartment. And in Cheers, it's the bar. That's the only place you really visit. And How I Met Your Mother, it's the bar and their apartment. And you have to make sure this feels right and that you make the audience feel like they're at home. And so building that out and picking the right spot, I think you're probably right. They were just exploring some of the space, and they kind of said that this gives us the most opportunity to play and be connected with our actors. And so they still, to a degree explore the space as the seasons go, but like 90% of their time is spent at that one table. And that becomes their space for sure. And they even, have episodes where they fight over that space and all the silliness that goes with that. But I mean, that's basically all I got for this guy.
Cool. Well, I definitely would recommend it to anybody looking for, pretty much like a feel-good show that will give you a lot of payoff, because some shows, they don't give you they're funny and they're like enjoyable, but they don't give you like the payoffs of being a consistent watcher like this show does. Like it is, I would argue, one of the best shows for feeling like you've got an inside point of view on things. Where like something that happened, you'd be like, oh, that was from season 2. I'm in season 5. That was from season 2 when the chick did the thing and with the dude, and you notice those things, and so it makes you feel like, oh, I'm so glad that I watched season 2, right? Because now I can pick that up, and I noticed that they called that out. Oh, I'm so glad that I watched that episode 4 episodes ago because then they brought that up.
You're totally right. It's
just fantastic. Yeah.
The payoff is so much better if you've been following along and watching in order, like much more than the other two shows, Cheers and Friends. And it's like, oh, the pineapple incident. Yeah. Oh man. Yeah. I remember that and how weird it was and how we never got an answer or whatever.
And the goat.
And I love at the very end of the show, they walk you back through all these characters that you met along the way. And that had to be the hardest shot in the entire show because scheduling Jennifer Morrison and Sarah Chalk and all these amazing actors onto the same day, onto the same scene, rehearsing it, blocking it, and nailing it, where they have this really long one take where they walk you through everybody's life as it is today. Like you don't get that. I've never seen that in another sitcom ending. Not off the top of my head. And I've seen a few of these, I guess, long running sitcoms, and that's really cool. And it's a really great payoff that says, we appreciate our fans and we're building. And the writing, I'm just really impressed because the writing was a little clunky, like I was saying, but it doesn't take them long to find the rhythm and to make really great jokes, because even in the final episode, they're still making new inside jokes instead of just, Barney loves suits. They're going to find new ways to play with that. Whereas opposed to Friends, I feel like by the final season, they were just basically, Joey likes sandwiches and the audience laughs. Like in this, it's not just Barney likes suits and everybody laughs. It's Barney's built out an entire secret wardrobe and he can't pick out his tie, and the tie is the most important thing, but the tie is a metaphor for his marriage. And like, they use these things in really fun ways, and they're constantly reinventing their own tropes in a way that I never felt Friends did, and I felt like they just kind of phoned it in after a certain point. Whereas Carter Bays and Craig Thomas were just constantly playing and experimenting and finding new things. Like the final episode, Barney and high fives, and instead of making it a just another high five, they were like, we're gonna have a high five to end all high fives that'll ring throughout eternity, and it's the high infinity. And they make a Ghostbusters reference, which is also in the pilot. And I just love that they're constantly thinking not just how can we insert our own kind of running themes and tropes, but how can we make them fresh and new again. And even if you know it's coming, they're going to do it in a slightly different way and a slightly different take. And I just really appreciate the writing as the show progressed. I'm hoping I get to see something from these two guys again at some point.
Agreed, man.
Nice.
Awesome.
Yeah. So what are you going to recommend?
Something not at all like this. In fact, the complete opposite of this. We've been recommending shows lately, but kind of going back to films. And a film that I have been, for whatever reason, been wanting to rewatch. I think just because I have this like hankering to see like an amazing performance. But I'm gonna recommend There Will Be Blood, which I told you is totally not like this. But who cares? Right? It doesn't have to be on the same path there. But I've always been a massive fan of Daniel Day-Lewis. I think that I'm a massive fan of someone, an actor like Daniel Day-Lewis, whose method, and then Joaquin Phoenix, who is pretty much the polar opposite of that, where like roles don't affect him. He's, when he's done, when the yell cut, he's fine and he's laughing, right? He's the opposite of that, but he can get to the same place that Daniel Day-Lewis can get to, who is literally in character constantly all the time, and has to be like, that's the way that he acts. And so it's like, there's this dichotomy of how you get to the truth, right? Some people need it to be the truth in order to get to it, and others can create their own truth. And this movie is just, he's done some really intense stuff like Gangs of New York and like Gangs of New York, and it's which is still really, really good. But this is like this quiet, just brutality, that is, to me, his best performance, because of that. In Gangs of New York, he's brutal, but he talks a lot.
Yeah.
He barely says anything half the time. He never says the real thing in this movie, but he barely says anything, and it's just acting to the 10th power. It's unreal. So yeah, There Will Be Blood.
Nice. Really good. I'm going to stick with the shows, and I'm going to recommend on Netflix, there's a show called Black AF. It's technically hashtag Black AF, and it's absolutely incredible. Like, I was not a huge fan of Blackish, and it's fine. I don't know. I guess I'm just not an Anthony Anderson fan. Like, there's moments that I like him, but I'm just not going to tune in week after week for him. And so for whatever reason, Blackish never caught on for me. But the same creator behind that steps in front of the camera, and as the creator of Blackish, he steps in front of the camera. So it's kind of a Seinfeld, and imagine
Curb Your Enthusiasm kind of thing.
Yes, very much exactly that. So it's like Larry David went off and created Curb Your Enthusiasm. He created Black AF, And this show is so funny because it takes aim at everybody. I mean, it's certainly, discussing Black culture and Black history, and it's also exploring, just the life of, a Black family who's mega rich. And so it spares absolutely nobody. And I was literally just watching it by myself and laughing hysterically. It's fantastic. So I'll, put a trailer in the show notes that you can check out, along with There Will Be Blood. So check those out and stay tuned for next week. We're going to take on perhaps our final sitcom of this little detour when we cover Seinfeld, the pilot for Seinfeld. And so tune in for that. And don't forget, subscribe, review us on iTunes or Stitcher or wherever you listen to us at. I have no idea how people find us. And if you want to comment on this episode, you can do that at thepestlepodcast.com/howimetyourmother.
And our quote of the day we're going to leave you with is from Maya Angelou. Love recognizes no barriers. It jumps hurdles, leaps fences, penetrates walls to arrive at its destination full of hope. Just like Ted Mosby.
Yeah. It's so
and
obvious.
Steals blue French horns off
right.
walls of restaurants. It's beautiful. And that makes me actually it's an endearing thing that Ted is like that. I think that in some way we all would love to be like that, and society, kind of makes us feel like that's crazy. Yeah. You're insane, but sure, I wanted to tell my wife I loved her way before I thought that I should have, you know what I mean? So, but why not? Why not?
I love it.
Go crazy.
Go crazy.
Love's crazy anyway. It really is.
Gather you rosebuds while you may.
Well said. 2 quotes of the day. Oh, it's been fun, man.
Same. Love it.
So make sure to join us next week. Like Wes said, we'll be covering Seinfeld, the pilot episode. I'm very much looking forward to that. Until then, I am Todd.
I'm Wes.
Go watch some movies. Pew 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 pew. Shoot up.
Shoot up.
That's the 2 fat naked bikers off the green. Off the 9th green having sex. How am I supposed to chip with that going on?